was brought up by strong, creative, hardworking folks who love to work with their hands. They shaped me into the man I am today, thankful for the lessons of the past, confident in the present, and eager to take on tomorrow's challenge. Maybe you can relate, and maybe you've been looking for a community of like-minded problem solvers with a hunger to create. If you desire to reconcile being an old soul in a new world, stick around. You're welcome here. My name is Bear, and this is Sawdust Boogie. Welcome to episode 1 of Sawdust Boogie. Now, I want you to know I've had to think long and hard about the direction of this channel due to the overwhelming response of a wide diversity of prospective viewers. But what I've realized is this: we all have shops. Whether you have a 3x5 outdoor closet in your apartment patio, or you're blessed or cursed like me to have a 1,200 square foot shop, we've all got them and they all need attention. What I've decided is we are going to spend 2021 focusing on improving our shop. We are going to clean up and functionalize so that we can be more productive for 2022. And there's a couple things that I'm talking about when I refer to functionalizing. One thing that I think about in my shop is frequency of use. How often am I going back to that same tool or that same process over and over? That's a heavy thing for me. I think about that a lot because at the end of the day, I don't have a lot of time to move 10 things to get my table saw out, or to dig to the back of my closet to grab out a certain drill bit. I need it and I need it now. Another thing is, I want my shop space to inspire me. I want to look around and I want to see cool vintage signs and pictures of my trips and tools that I love that I can't wait to use. And that's important to me. I want to walk out and be in my happy space. So we're going to work on that. Another big one that I did not have for the first 3 to 4 years is proper utilities. So for me, that means a lot of power. It doesn't require any water, but it does mean a lot of power. We're going to talk about that on all different levels. Like I said, you may only need an extension cord for your 3x5 shop, but I would imagine you would like to know what the safe extension cord would be to use and proper gauging and things like that. If you don't know about grounding, that might be interesting to you. The big one too for me, guys, is that we are trying to organize for now and not forever. As badly as I want to concrete things in my life for the next 50 years, it just doesn't get to work out that way. We're trying to work now. We want to do things now. We want to clear up floor space now. We want to get things above our heads and out of our way now so that we can get to work. And so that's what our first video is going to be. We're going to be talking about some basic shelves that I've built a lot of that tend to work for me, and they can handle a whole lot of weight and they don't cost you a lot of money. So let's get started. Today we're going to make a 2 foot by 7 foot shelf using construction grade lumber because A, it's cheap. Actually not right now, it's very expensive right now, but I had this laying around. Because it's been laying around, it is not some of the straightest boards I've seen. So I want to talk to you guys about a little bit of what you want to look for when you're messing with construction grade lumber for things that you want to be straight, okay? So 2x4s are meant for rough framing. They're going to be inside walls, and there's different tolerances that those guys allow. So they're not as concerned about things like a bow or a twist. They still factor those into the work they do, and we're going to do the same. So what I've gone through is I've identified which ones of these have a bow in the board, which is, if we look at the long side of the board, it's going to have a bow this way or this way. Some of these have a crown in the board, which would be the short face of the board, and it would show in this direction, right? And some of these have a twist, which means we can look down and see that our plane changes as we go down the board. I like to go through and draw some smiley faces on my boards. It helps me recognize what I've got. So I've gone through and I basically have, out of these boards, I have 1 smiley face, 2 flat faces, and 2 sad faces. So my smiley face is a nice straight board with no bow, no crown. This is going to be great for a 7 foot run, okay? We need a second one to match that. We're going to have to pick one of these straight faces because it's all we've got. So of the 2, I've gone through and identified that 1 has a little bit of a twist and 1 has a little bit of a bow. I can work a bow out with a shelf, so I'm going to go ahead and select this as my other 7 foot board. This guy right here, because it has less of a twist than these, I'm going to use this for the supports along the shelf. As you can see here, here's kind of what we're building. This is a bigger version because this is meant to hold a lot more weight. But basically, we are building a 2 foot deep wall with supports every 2 feet. So we're gonna need 5 22.5 supports for this shelf. We can get 4 of them out of here. I'll steal 1 out of one portion of this, and we can use the rest of these twisted boards to make our 2 brackets, because they're still gonna be able to support the same weight. They're just not gonna look as straight when they're hung up there, but I don't think we're gonna notice. So let's get started. First thing we're gonna do, we're gonna trim these babies down to 7 feet. So one thing we need to do before we trim this down to length is we want to go ahead and get rid of the factory end on these boards. I've already done that on that end. So I've used my speed square to get a nice clean cut on that end of the board. I've got them lined up down there. I'm going to mark my 7 feet. If you don't know what a bird's beak is, you should be using one, but it's basically you mark a line skewed to the left or the right, whatever you feel first, and then another one that looks just like a bird's beak, and it leaves you a nice point. Now, I'm gonna take my speed square, and I'm gonna go ahead and strike that line just so I have a good visual reference of what I'm gonna cut. Boom. Then I'm gonna scoot that back. And I am gonna use this baby as a guide for my saw. So I've factored in my blade width. I've got both boards gripped together. I've got my speed square where I want it. This is gonna give me a good cut. Notice that I've got the edge of the speed square towards me so I can pull out towards the board, which gives me way better support with this guy. And we're just gonna cut it. The next thing we need to do is we are going to go ahead and mark this guide for our stretchers. There's 2 ways you can mark these. Sorry, our supports. You can either just start on the end and start marking every 2 feet across here, or you can try and balance out the fact that this is only 7 feet, so we're going to be a foot short. I don't know what we're going to do. I think we'll just start on one end and call it a day. So I'm going to come down here. I know that I'm going to need 1.5 inches for this bird's beak. I'm going to come down to 24 from here. I'm going to mark that, and that is the center of our board. So now I'm going to go back 3/4 of an inch and draw that. 48, 3/4 of an inch. An inch back. Once we've done that, I'm going to go ahead and draw that reference line. You'll notice on my bird's mouth here, try and leave a perpendicular line and then a skewed line so I know that this is going to be the left side of the board, and I'll do the same there. Go ahead and do the same here. And then we've got them all marked out. Next thing we need to do is start cutting some 22.5-inch supports for these bad boys. All right, so we're gonna make some 22.5-inch supports to fit our 24-inch shelves. I've already taken this edge off here, so we've got a nice surface to start with here, and we're just gonna start marking them out. One thing to keep in mind with this board, which happens to work out well for us, is there is a nasty knot right here. It happens to fall right in line with where we wanna be. So I'm going to make a mark for 22.5. I'm going to go ahead and cut this first one, and I'm going to show you how we're going to deal with that. Rather than use our tape 5 times, we're going to use this to mark the rest of our boards. But first we need to deal with this ugly knot. Now we've got a 96-inch board. We're using 22.5 4 times, which means that we are gonna have 1.5 inches left over 4 times, which is 6 inches. We kind of have to play with. So I'm gonna take that and use it to my advantage, and I'm gonna mark 5.5 inches in from this, leave myself a little bit of wiggle room and blade room, and I am gonna go ahead and get rid of this junk. So we don't have to have that anywhere in our shelves. I also realize that this blade is not as sharp as I want it to be, but since I know I'm going to cut some plywood with it later for you guys, I'm going to go ahead and replace the blade after I get done cutting my rough frame. I feel a whole lot better about that. Now, we can use this board, like I said, to mark our next round of boards. remember that you want to keep that pencil line. Now, rather than use the second board to mark, we'll continue to use the first board. Okay, let's hope we don't embarrass ourselves on camera here. And looky there, we've got a little bit left over. We got rid of our knot. And we still got our 4 boards out. Still need one more though. So we're gonna set these to the side and we're gonna steal one from one of these sad boards. We're gonna set those to the side. And next we're gonna go ahead and line up our frame. So this is the easy part. We're going to go ahead and we've got our lines marked for our supports. We are going to drill for 2 screws each support on each board, and we're going to go ahead and use a countersink. If you don't have a countersink, typically what I try and do when I'm doing some screwing like this is I want to match my bit to the inner diameter of the screw without the threads, and that kind of gives everything a little bit to bite to. But here we go. I do have a knot right here, but it tends to go out, so I'm going to go ahead and drill there. I'll start up here, and I've got my bit set just a couple inches, so when it pokes through the other side of the board, it'll leave a mark on our second board, making our life a little easier. Here we go. Just like that, we got us a shelf, fella. Now, normally we would be using a straight edge guide on this, but this is again some wood I had laying around. It's got a nice little bit of a bow to it. So what I've decided to do is I already struck a straight line here, 8 feet long. I'm gonna take this little bit off of here and I'll have my 2 foot by 8 foot section. And I'll just have to take a little bit off the end and we'll be good to go on this, okay? One thing to keep in mind is your blade height. Thing to think about with blade height is you need to have some of this tooth sticking out, and my battery's in, so I'm keeping my hand away from it. The way I like to think about it is I like to actually just let the cutting tooth stick through the other side, not the gullet, and I never really have any problems with that. So there's probably other opinions on that, but that's the way I prefer to do things. With that said, we've got a fresh blade on here, and we're gonna let this baby rip. One other thing to think about when you're freehand cutting like this is that I don't know how many of you guys have marching experience, but the whole idea of keeping the upper body steady while the lower part of the body moves you forward into your cut, okay? So same concept. So I'm gonna walk very slowly along this so that my tool doesn't have to move. And here we go, and I'm gonna go ahead and get myself a head start. Just like that, we got a good clean cut. All we gotta do is drop a foot off the end of this board. Now this I can use a straight edge jig on. And this is different for every saw. And I'm gonna double check, but I believe this saw is 1.25 inches to the inside of the blade from the left side of the fence, and that is correct. So I need to go ahead and factor that into this cut. So I'm gonna get this out of my way just a little bit so I can come over here. And I'm just gonna work backwards from 10 so I don't have to deal with this end of the tape here. So backwards from 10, 8.75 inches, 13.5. So, let me double check myself there. 13.25. All right. We'll go ahead and set our straight edge on those new marks. Get that locked in. Some of you guys may have a track saw. I'm not so fortunate. Here we go. I'm gonna go ahead and cut left-handed so I can support this cutoff when it falls. I don't want to bind the blade. All right, we got a 2x7 shelf. Next, we're gonna build some brackets. All right, so I've already made a shelf bracket so I can show you guys what's going on here. But what we need to understand is that this is basically, even in inflated prices of today, this is a $5 bracket that can hold a serious amount of weight, okay? So this is just a 2x4 construction grade. What we've done is we've cut this top at 24 inches because we know that's the width of our shelf or the depth of our shelf. We've cut this at 22.5 just so that it's perfectly symmetrical. And what we've done at that point is we've got this 45-degree support. So the reason this jack works so well, or this support, is because we'll call this board our jack board. All the weight from this shelf is not only supported on the back end from sitting on top of the jack, but because we've got this 45-degree piece here, it's gonna carry the load down here. So this is a very sturdy support. I've got them everywhere. I'm almost 280 pounds, and I can climb on any one of these shelves I have with full confidence that there will be no deflection or any scary cracking of any kind. So basically, we've got the 24-inch piece, 22.5-inch piece, and then what looks to be the hard part would be the 45-degree diagonal. How do we cut that? Well, I'll show you. And really, the 45 is an arbitrary number. We're just shooting for 45. So once I built this first one, then I knew where the measurements needed to be for this second one. But let me just show you how I do it. I've got my 24-inch piece here. I've got my 22.5-inch piece here. I've got a large square in the corner, so I know that I've got an accurate 90-degree representation. And then I can literally just eyeball this, guys, and say, okay, well, I don't want to waste any wood. I'm going to put that corner right on what I think is probably the centered on this angle here. And I'm going to do the same over here. And all I've got to do is take my pencil and just make a quick line, and there we go. I've got my measurements. So, like I said, my first one was done this way, and then once I cut that, then yes, I can determine, well, you missed it by 1/2 inch. This one is 4 inches in, and this one is 3.5 inches in, but it doesn't matter because we've still built the proper structure. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut these. I'm gonna get this screwed together. I did countersink everything, and we did use proper construction screws. When I first got started doing this stuff, I used to love to use drywall screws. I'm sure a lot of you did, but when we're building something like this, we cannot depend on a drywall screw. You need a true construction screw. So I'll check back in a few minutes, and we will be ready to put this shelf on the wall. Well, guys, that's it. It's speedy, it's simple, and most importantly, it's sturdy. As you can tell, I've got a little bit of my junk scattered around, and it'll probably take me the rest of the night to figure out where to put one sign, but we'll get there. And heck, it may not even stay there. Like I said, this is not forever. This is for now. I'm getting things out of my way so that my flow can increase. What I want to do is just talk about a few things that I'm going to try hard to shoot for in 2021. Typically, I don't do well with resolutions. I'm sure most of us don't, but if we don't make them, we can't break them, right? So, the biggest one for me is I need to do more for me in my space. And I don't mean the social media platform. I mean my shop as it works for me. Because if I don't make myself happy and eager to get in the shop, then how am I ever going to be motivated to do things for others? So that's important to me. I'm going to try and take a little more time for myself and for improving my space. The other thing, and we talked about it a little bit in the podcast. If you haven't listened, check it out. Episode 1 of Sawdust Boogie. I'm really proud of it. But we talked about the 10% more rule. I'm just going to give that little bit more in my shop when I'm done and when I start every day. And one of the big ones with that is cleanliness. It's important to work in a clean shop. Nobody wants to be tripping over cutoffs and sawdust. Not to mention it's dangerous. You can slip on sawdust with the types of shoes I wear. You can trip over a board. You've got running saws and sharp blades everywhere. It's not safe. So clean your shop. You're going to feel better working in a clean shop, and again, it's safe. With those few things in mind, we're going to get started with this year. And again, we're going to focus on improving our shops, okay? I hope this video gave you something. If not, stay tuned. We're going to do a lot more of them on a lot broader topics. But for now, this is something that's important to me. Stick with it. This is the first video out. We're supposed to be January 1st. We're running a little late. That's my fault. I'm scared of the whole process. But look forward to the February video, and we will see you guys soon. Thanks for watching. And remember, if you're going to pick a boogie, it might as well be this one. This is episode 1. Camera notes, I suppose you'd call it. And if anybody's interested, this is oak ply, 3/4 red oak. Good stuff.